So it's fair to say the 14-inch MacBook Pro is something a lot of us are waiting for, and if I were to make a list of the most anticipated releases of 2021, I'm pretty sure the 14-inch MacBook Pro will be very close to the top. And rightly so, because this is the dream machine for many, including myself, and so today let's delve into some pretty juicy leaks regarding it. We have a possible release date that is way closer than we initially thought, we have details on the cooling system on these new MacBook Pros, and we have details on whether this MacBook Pro could replace the M1 machine we have today. So yes, pretty interesting things to delve into and theorize, and so without further ado, make sure to like and subscribe, click that bell notification for the latest Apple news and rumors, and with that being said, let's just tuck in. Right, so the first leak comes from Maguire Woods on Twitter, aka Jiroku. I've covered his leaks in the past. Beware though, he has no credibility rating on Apple Track right now, and so do take the information with a pinch of salt, though that applies to pretty much every leak I discuss on YouTube, so yeah, there's that. But anyways, recently on Twitter somebody asked him when does he expect the 14-inch MacBook Pro to come out, and he says he's been hearing March from his sources. Now this is quite surprising because right now a lot of the talk amongst the Apple leaking world seems to be the second half of the year, and that does make a lot of sense if you think about it, because we tend to see the big Mac upgrades towards the end of the year, for example the M1 event that took place in November, so yeah, second half of the year did initially make more sense. But at the same time, I wouldn't completely dismiss this theory about March being the release date of the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Because you might remember, I've made some videos about this, which of course you can check out in the icon above, but essentially some sources are saying that maybe we could see the 16-inch MacBook Pro getting the Apple Silicon treatment in March. In fact, Mark Gurman, a very credible leaker, told us that apparently Apple was planning to release a 16-inch MacBook Pro at the Apple Silicon event, but because of production delays, it unfortunately had to be pushed back. And so my thinking is, if Apple is planning to release a 16-inch MacBook Pro, then surely they can't just leave the 4-port Intel 13-inch MacBook Pro we have right now, because that would look really awkward in the lineup with every machine except that having Apple Silicon. It just wouldn't fit in, and so of course Apple giving us a 14-inch and 16-inch refresh at the same time seems more plausible. Now of course in the past I've theorized that maybe we're seeing 2 refreshes of the MacBook Pro, maybe one with just a spec upgrade and no redesign, and then later in the year the design we've been waiting for with of course mini LED, more ports, and the lack of a touch bar. And so maybe this 14-inch MacBook Pro might just end up being a 4-port 13-inch MacBook Pro with the existing design and maybe a slightly bigger display, but most importantly, it's just going to be all about the chip, and then we'll see the true redesign later in the year. Now Maguire does say that apparently he's not sure about this, so yeah, as I said before, take the information with a grain of salt, but I do think if this does happen, it's not going to be the huge redesign. I think that is unlikely. I think at the very least we'll be seeing maybe the same machine we have right now, so the 4-port 13-inch MacBook Pro, but with M1X. Now someone in that thread actually brought up a good question regarding this 14-inch MacBook Pro, and that is, will the price be $1,300 or $1,800? Because of course for the longest time we've had 2 versions of the MacBook Pro. We've had a base $1,300 model with 2 ports and a higher end version with better specs and 4 ports. Now my prediction in the past was that the 14-inch MacBook Pro replaces the 13-inch 4-port version we have right now. So the $1,800 model, that's getting the 14-inch treatment, and the $1,300 model will stay with M1 for the foreseeable future. Now Maguire did say that he's working on a report regarding this, so I will keep my eyes peeled for that report, but actually I had a pretty interesting observation about the M1 machine, and I think there actually is a chance the 14-inch model could start at $1,300 and the M1 machine might die very soon. And this really has to do with the touch bar. Apple can't really keep around a touch bar on the base MacBook Pro if the higher end versions don't have it. Now, yes, I know that to real professionals, having actual function keys is actually an improvement over the touch bar, but to the average consumer who also buys the MacBook Pros, they're going to notice the base model has a touch bar and the higher end versions don't, and that's going to be really odd. So yes, if Apple is thinking of getting rid of the touch bar, it's going to be erased from history, and so Apple has to get rid of the base M1 model. And so if these are launching this year, I do think there is a good chance the M1 model is about to be killed off for maybe an M1 version of the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Because obviously there will still be a difference between these two versions of the MacBook Pro, and so expect the $1,300 14-inch MacBook Pro to maybe retain 2 ports and possibly even the M1, and then of course the higher end version gets M1X, more ports, the whole ordeal. I think that's going to be the machine for true professionals. Now yes, I know that a lot of you might think that Apple killing off the M1 MacBook Pro already is a little too soon, but in the past Apple has killed off the 15-inch MacBook Pro and then replaced it with a huge upgrade in the form of the 16-inch MacBook Pro within 6 months. And so I think there is a possibility we could see that happen again with the 14-inch MacBook Pro. But do note, the 16-inch MacBook Pro came out 6 months after the 15-inch MacBook Pro. I think that's the minimum, and so that does mean having the 14-inch release in March seems a bit too early, because of course by then the M1 machine will only be 4 months old, and so that pretty much says yes, we should see this machine later in the year like other sources have suggested. Although I do kind of have a rebuttal to my own point, but essentially the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro we have today could be replaced by the future premium version of the MacBook Air. So I covered this in another video, which you can check out in the icon above, but essentially Mark Gurman, again, very credible source, he told us Apple is working on a premium version of the Air with MagSafe, more ports, possibly mini LED, and of course that new design. And well, he specifically mentions there will be a more high-end version of the Air, so the current machine we have today will stay at the same price point, and this will sit alongside it as a more premium alternative. Pretty much like the Pro we have today, and so if Apple wants to get rid of the touch bar, they could just replace the M1 Pro with, of course, this new Air, and the Air should be launching at the end of 2020, so we would be due for an upgrade anyway, since this is a yearly refresh cycle, so yeah, it makes sense they give us an Air instead of a watered-down version of the 14-inch MacBook Pro. I guess we'll have to see, but because Apple needs to get rid of the touch bar completely from the lineup, they will definitely give us a redesigned laptop of sorts at the $1,300 price point. So yes, either way, I'm excited. Right, let's end this rumor roundup with heat management on the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So of course we can expect the beast of a chip, that is the M1X in these new MacBook Pros. It should have 16 power cores allegedly, so it's going to be an absolute beast, and obviously because it's going to be a more powerful chip, you need some serious cooling in the machine to back this performance up. And well, in the past with Intel machines, MacBooks have not really been great in terms of cooling. In fact, they've been pretty bad when it comes to thermal management. But thankfully, with the efficiency of the M1 and now with improved cooling in general, we should see a huge improvement with these new machines. So the new rumor is the 14-inch MacBook Pro will gain all the upgrades the 16-inch MacBook Pro has right now in terms of cooling. And so this means the heat pipe is going to be bigger, there's going to be thermal pads, and the size of the heatsink is going to be increased by 35%. And so this basically means we should see better airflow and better heat management on these new MacBook Pros, and the 16-inch existing MacBook Pro we have right now with this system performs incredibly well with an archaic Intel chip. So combine this great thermal system with the efficiency of Apple Silicon, and you've got a beast. You've just got an amazing machine. I can't wait to experience this amazing power. But anyways, that'll do for today's video. Tell me in the comments below, when do you think the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro will come? And I mean the redesigns. What do you think will be the time frame we see them in? And on that note, I'll end it here. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click that bell notification for the latest Apple news and rumors. Check out a video here in the icon above about the iPhone 13 and some pretty mad changes. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.